So recently, one of the biggest names in the history of professional wrestling, John Cena, has called it career with one of the most polarizing finishes of all time. Mr. Never Give Up tapping out and saying on the Cody Rhodes podcast that he wanted to put a finality on the career of the in-ring performer John Cena. And it got me to thinking of the plethora of legends and Hall of Famers that did not know when to call it a career. That's what we're going to talk about today. The all-time greats in professional wrestling that took too long to retire. So with that being said, let's go. So we're going to start off with Mr. Break the Walls Down, 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 down. One of the most accomplished wrestlers of all time, Chris Jericho, aka Y2J. Someone who has worked every major promotion in the United States, from WCW to having one of the greatest debuts in WWE history with the Countdown versus him and The Rock, to having all-time feuds between him and Shawn Michaels, Rey Mysterio, being the only guy to say that he beat The Rock and Austin in the same night to become the Undisputed Champion, and has accomplished a lot of things to where he even went to AEW and became the first ever AEW World Champion. Chris Jericho has done it all. And with that being said, there's been rumors saying that he will come back to the WWE in 2026 to have one final run. And the thing is, I could care less. Chris Jericho, as I stated, has done it all in this business. And Chris Jericho, in my opinion, is past his prime. And that has been a discussion regarding Jericho for the past 2, 3, 4 years. Chris Jericho no longer is a guy that reinvents himself every so often. He isn't no longer a guy that's on the cutting edge of what's cool. He feels like an OG trying to latch on to what's ever popular. That's not the Chris Jericho I know and love. He's been getting so much hate over the past couple years that he's been getting go away X-Pac heat. People don't want to see him. It just feels like he's taking up people's airtime and television time, making things about himself. He already had his time as a top guy. It's time to move on and let others shine. And it feels like Jericho has not done that over the past years. And even when he tries to do it, it still doesn't feel genuine. In my opinion, Chris Jericho should have retired, I would say, back in 2021 at All In versus MJF, with the stipulation being if Jericho loses, he retires. I think that would have been the perfect way to go out. You're only roughly a year removed from losing the AEW championship. You still are at your height. People still love to watch you. I think that would have been a perfect way to go out on top. But speaking of a star-studded career, let's talk about Kurt Angle, in the words of Chris Jericho. Kurt Angle, your Olympic gold medalist, the only man to win a gold medal with a broken freaking neck. Kurt Angle, who's considered arguably the greatest in-ring performer of all time, had one of the fastest rise to the top in WWE, winning every major title, from the Intercontinental title to the European title, to then winning King of the Ring, to then defeating The Rock to become WWF champion, and won multiple world championships, had all-time matches with Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit, Edge, Rey Mysterio, just to name a few. Then eventually, after his time was up in WWE with the TNA, and then again became the focal point of that promotion, having all-time feuds with AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, being kind of the pillar of the promotion. And then he came back to WWE, immediately went into the WWE Hall of Fame, and that was great. But then he still wrestled, and he was no longer the Kurt Angle that we knew and loved. He just looked like every time he walked, it hurt. Like he just looked like a shell of himself from like 2017 to 2019. And it's very, very, very much a shame that Kurt Angle could not get the final match that he wanted, which was John Cena, because Vince McMahon had his head up his own ass and wanted to put over Baron Corbin. Baron freaking Corbin, bro. Baron Corbin, bro. Of all the names, Baron Corbin. I think the perfect time for him to call it a career is back in like 2014. Come back to the WWE, return at the Rumble that was in Pittsburgh in 2014. Have a one final run to where you face guys that you've never faced before, like a Bryan Danielson. Maybe you can persuade CM Punk to stick around a little bit longer. Maybe redo feuds like Randy Orton, John Cena one final time, which is probably the person that would have eventually retired you. But even with all that being said, it's still an illustrious career. Just wish it would have ended a better way than Baron Corbin. But speaking of someone that went from TNA to WWE, let's talk about it's Sting. A man called Sting. It's a man called Sting. A guy that made his name by facing what many people consider is the greatest of all time in the Nature Boy. Woo! Ric Flair, back in the old NWA days. He will eventually basically be the face and guy in NWA to WCW. Be a real life superhero. Unlike your Hulk Hogan's and Ultimate Warriors, he didn't have no baggage of refusing to put people over. He always did his best to have great matches, and then he will wind up changing his persona to the Crow. Shout out to Scott Hall, rest in peace, and having one of the biggest angles of all time, NWO versus Sting. Multi-time world champion. Eventually, once WCW called it quits, went to TNA, kind of became the face of TNA there as well, being the legend that is the most respected, being in 4 straight main events of Bound for Glory, which is the WrestleMania for TNA, the Starrcade for TNA, winning 3 out of the 4, being what he was in WCW, being the franchise. And then he went to WWE back in 2014, will have his feud with Triple H, which he lost at WrestleMania. It was still mind-boggling. Then he would have a match with Seth Rollins, which damn near ended his career. Had to call it a career until, by the grace of God, he was able to come back to wrestling in ring back in AEW. Never had like a major one-on-one match, but was able to attach himself to Darby Allin and make Darby Allin a bigger star. And in my opinion, Sting for sure stuck around way too long. Sting, and I feel it's really a disservice to Sting that he did not go to WWE following his WCW stint. I think maybe he would have spent maybe a year or two in TNA. That would have been cool. But the fact that he spent so long in TNA and was just, even though he was a legend and even though people respected him, it's just like, bro, like, why are you wasting your time in TNA when you have feuds you haven't done, like you versus John Cena, Randy Orton, or Shawn Michaels, or Triple H, or Undertaker, a match that we really wanted. I feel like if he would have left TNA back in like 07, 08, we could have got so many great matches and feuds before calling it career, which I think probably his last great year in ring was probably like 2009 when he was TNA World Champion. I thought he was still putting on solid matches. I think 2009 probably would have been a time, at very latest 2010, to call it a career. But yeah, just, I can't believe you stayed at TNA for so long. Like, what are you doing? Him and Kurt Angle both. Like, it's just like, why are you in TNA? You deserve so much better. Wrestling in front of the same crowd every other week in the same arena. It's like, come on, bro. But yeah, Sting deserved, in my opinion, even though he got a great send-off in AEW, I do think he deserved a way better final year or two of his career by going to WWE and having all-time feuds and matches. Speaking of not getting the match between him in a certain opponent. Let's talk about The Undertaker. The Undertaker, dog. I will never forget back in 2002, 2003, watching a DVD that was on like Daily Motion with The Undertaker, who was still the American Badass Biker Taker, doing an interview in like 2002 talking about, I don't want to be that guy that's in that ring, and people are like, man, you remember when Undertaker used to be good? Yeah, son, Undertaker, he used to be hella good, man. You should have seen him when he was in his prime. I remember vividly Taker talking about that back in 01, 02, only for him to be the guy that could not go no more. But before we even get to that point, Undertaker is the Phenom. He is one of, if not the greatest gimmick and characters in professional wrestling history. No one else could have played the character of Undertaker like The Undertaker. And just like Chris Jericho that I mentioned before, he always found ways to change his appearance over time, whether it was his hair, his attire, his theme song, his unforgettable feud between him and Mankind, his unforgettable feud between him and Kane, then his unforgettable character change becoming the Ministry of Darkness, which is my favorite Undertaker actually, in the theme and all that, and Paul Bearer and that tandem between them two, and then him become the American Badass eventually, which also I think is very underrated and overhated, and turning heel, having unforgettable matches with like Ric Flair and Jeff Hardy in a ladder match, Brock Lesnar, and then going back to being the Dead Man and having the whole streak thing become a thing at WrestleMania and being undefeated at WrestleMania, having all-time matches between him and Edge, Randy Orton, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, having that whole run. Oh, man. But then he stuck around too long. He had a great cinematic match with AJ Styles, which was his official last match, but just like, damn, dog. And then he had one of the most worst matches of all time, which is him versus Goldberg in Saudi Arabia, which I think anybody would have had a bad match with Goldberg because it's Goldberg. But it just showed that he just, I think if Goldberg that night in 2019 faced the Undertaker of like 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009 Undertaker, that Taker would have found a way to make sure that that match went off without a hitch. Same thing for the 2-on-2 match he had with him and Kane versus DX in Saudi Arabia at Crown Jewel. I just think him being the respected vet and the anchor, everything falls on him. He just could not deliver anymore. So in my opinion, I think the perfect way to go out would have been going 20-0 at WrestleMania after that 4-year story arc of him facing Shawn Michaels twice, almost losing, facing Triple H at 27, and him not be able to walk out on his own power, and then coming back, facing Triple H one more time, Hell in a Cell, Shawn Michaels referee. You're never going to have a better story than that. There's nothing Taker could have did the way he's going to have a better story than that. It should have just ended at WrestleMania 28, in my opinion. This one's going to hurt. Speaking of all-time rivalry with The Undertaker, this one's going to hurt. Let's talk about Have a Nice Day, Mick Foley. Mick Foley is another one that is one of the greatest minds in the history of this business, with him putting his body on the line every single night to entertain the fans like we've seen from no other. If you don't know his career in Japan versus Terry Funk and the death matches he had in Japan, to him going to WCW, doing the whole Catch as Jack run, going to ECW, doing the Catch as Jack run, come to WWE, being Mankind, and being this unique just spectacle of a character, which is demented, but have so many dimensions. And then him going on to feud with Undertaker out the gate, to then turning babyface after learning about his history, being Dude Love, then being, Cash as Jack, even in WWF at the time, which nobody could have ever saw that coming, to him eventually being respected with his infamous match versus Undertaker in Hell in a Cell, flying off Hell in a Cell, getting up, getting chokeslammed through Hell in a Cell, getting up again, still doing the match, which made him a legend, and he'll always be remembered for life after that, to then going on his run to eventually become world champion in the match that made me a wrestling fan, him versus The Rock, January 4th, 1999, also cementing him as a legend. And then having all-time matches versus Triple H at Royal Rumble 2000 and MSG, then the Hell in a Cell match, which is supposed to be his last match of his career, at No Way Out 2000. That would have been a perfect way to go out. But he came back at WrestleMania because he never made an event in WrestleMania. And then he comes back to the ring about 4 years later versus Randy Orton, has a hell of a match at Backlash 2004. Even the month prior to that, WrestleMania 20, him and The Rock one final time versus Evolution, which in my opinion stole the show. Then he came back again in 2006 versus Edge, finally getting his WrestleMania moment. We all know the moment we're talking about, him getting speared through a flaming table in Chicago, WrestleMania 22. And that would have been a perfect time to go out. But then he comes back, he turns heel, oddly enough, feuds with Ric Flair, of all people. And it was an interesting feud, but it's just like nobody wanted to see that in 2006. Nobody wanted to see a heel Mick Foley. And then he leaves WWE, goes to TNA, was supposed to just be a figure in TNA, but wrestles and becomes TNA World Champion in 2009 versus Sting, which I was pissed about. I was pissed because this time was supposed to be about the new guys, the new era. AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, Chris Sabin, Alex Shelley, Jay Lethal. Like, it was supposed to be their time. Robert Roode, Eric Young. It's supposed to be their time. And now Mick Foley is out here becoming world champion in TNA in 2009. Like, him at WrestleMania 22 versus Edge was the perfect send-off for him. He got to go out as Cassius Jack. You put over Edge, who was going to be the next top heel in the company for the next 3-4 years. You got your WrestleMania moment. You had a hell of a match at WrestleMania, which even though I feel like WrestleMania 20 was a great match, you finally had a great one-on-one match at WrestleMania that everybody talks about still to this day and everybody remembers. Damn near 20 years later, that was the way to go out. And like I said, Mick Foley is one of the most intelligent guys and creative minds in the business, and just the fact that his body was not meant to continue to wrestle after all he put his body through to get noticed and to entertain the fans. Like, he should have just went out on WrestleMania 22, in my opinion, and call it a career. And last but not least, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair. I'm going to them two are going to be side by side. Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair. These two, in my opinion, are the two greatest professional wrestlers. Well, I think Hulk Hogan is the greatest sports entertainer. Ric Flair is the greatest professional wrestler of all time. And they have a long history of what Hulk Hogan did for WWE with Hulkamania and all that. Ric Flair, what he did for NWA and the Four Horsemen and all that. We already know the history spanning over like 4 decades, the 90s, 2000s, going to WWE after WCW went out of business. We already know all that. Ric Flair, 16-time world champion. Hulk Hogan, the most recognizable face in WWE and in wrestling history. But both of them, when they had it out to actually retire with some grace and a great story, they did not. We'll go with Hulk Hogan first because his is a little bit kind of weird. His final match is with, I think, like in TNA with like Bob in a random like live event, I think, or something like that. Him and somebody versus like Bobby Roode. I can't even tell you what the final match was. That's how crazy it is. I think maybe Bound for Glory 2012 when he helps out Sting, or it's like him versus Sting, I think. But yeah, I don't even care to research it because like it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. He definitely should have retired back in like 2005, 2006. If he wasn't going to do the feud with Shawn Michaels, then have Randy Orton be the guy to retire him at SummerSlam. Randy Orton, who is still the legend killer. It was the perfect way for Hulk Hogan to go out with still someone who can still walk and still have somewhat of a match. But no, of course, you had to go over. Yeah, it's just a shame. And I'm not even going to make this about a hate train for Hulk Hogan. He had a perfect opportunity to go out. I mean, he kept talking about he had bad hips, bad knees. Okay, then why are you still wrestling in 2009? Why are you still wrestling in 2010? Why are you still wrestling in 2012? You can't even do the leg drop no more. Like, what are we doing? Because of a bad back and all that. It's like, he should have just retired in 06, allow Randy Orton to retire him at SummerSlam, call it a career, nothing to be ashamed of. You're already in the Hall of Fame, you're already a legend, and all that stuff. Ric Flair, another story, because you had the perfect story. Even though they kind of fumbled it along the way, they fumbled the story, but nobody remembers that. They all remember the final match they had with Shawn Michaels on WrestleMania 24. That was the perfect way to go out. Now, I know Ric Flair himself did not want to retire, and that's kind of the thing there. He did not want to retire. Vince thought he should retire. It kind of forced him to retire. But for the one time, I'm going to agree with Vince. Vince was right. Ric Flair should have retired in 2008 at WrestleMania 24 versus Shawn Michaels. You could have picked a better partner, and a perfect way to go out with the Shawn Michaels, I'm sorry, I love you. That will never, ever, ever people have been trying to redo that moment for years. Every time someone retires, they try to do that moment some way, somehow. Like Shawn Michaels, I'm sorry, I love you. Super kick, Ric Flair crying, Jim Ross on commentary. Like, come on! You're not gonna beat that, man. Like, Ric Flair, dog. Damn it. I think did he have his final match in like 2022 or something like that? It wasn't even that long ago. He passed out in the ring. It's just like, dog, come on, bro. Like, you doing songs with Migos. Like, what are you got the spotlight. You got you're on award shows in your robe. Like, nigga, drip. Like, niggas respect you. Even though you like Hulk Hogan don't really deserve to be respected. Like, if you know, you know. It's just like, damn, son. But yeah, that is my list of wrestlers that didn't know when to retire, stuck around too long. Give me a list of yours that really made you feel a way. Like, comment, subscribe, share all the things. Welcome to the Hive, bitch. There's Hayes Arcade, your hardcore casual fan. If you're not down with that, I got 2 words for you. Suck it.